Nyla's hands trembled as she folded the invitation for the third time that morning, trying to make the embossed letters stop swimming before her eyes. The presidential seal gleamed gold against cream paper, her name written in elegant script that seemed to mock her with its beauty. She was still staring at it when Madame Choi's phone rang, the shrill tone cutting through the house like a warning siren. "What?" Madame Choi's voice echoed from the sitting room, sharp with irritation. Then silence. Then a sound Nyla had never heard from her before, something between a gasp and a choke. "I see. Yes. Of course. Thank you for informing us." Footsteps, quick and angry, heading toward Nyla's closet. The door flew open without the courtesy of a knock. Madame Choi stood there with her phone clutched in one hand, her face a mask of barely contained rage. "The banquet has been postponed," she said, each word bitten off like she wanted to spit them out. 2 weeks. The president's office cited scheduling conflicts with international delegates. Her eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on Nyla. 2 more weeks of you being on that guest list. 2 more weeks of uncertainty. Yura appeared behind her mother, still in her silk robe, her face cream half applied. "What?" "But I've been preparing for tonight. The dress, the hair appointment, everything." "It's postponed, not cancelled," Madame Choi snapped. "Stop whining and think." She turned back to Nyla, and something in her expression made Nyla's blood run cold. "Get dressed. Properly. We're having a family meeting in 10 minutes. The door slammed shut. Nyla sat on her cot, invitation still in her hands, and felt the walls closing in. She knew that tone, knew that look. The Chois were planning something, and she was about to become collateral damage in whatever scheme they'd concocted. 10 minutes later, she stood in the formal dining room, still wearing her plain house dress because she owned nothing else that qualified as proper by Madame Choi's standards. The family sat around the table like a tribunal, with Nyla standing before them like an accused criminal. "Sit," Madame Choi commanded, gesturing to the chair at the far end. The fact that she was being invited to sit at all meant this was serious. Nyla sat, her spine straight, hands folded in her lap. Years of survival had taught her to be still when predators were near. "Let's be frank," Madame Choi began, her fingers steepled beneath her chin. "Something unusual is happening. The president's son noticed you at the banquet. He spoke to you at the park's garden party. And now, on the very day of the selection ceremony, you receive a personal invitation and the entire event gets postponed." She leaned forward. "I don't believe in coincidences." "Neither do I," Yura added, eyeing Nyla with open hostility. "What did you do? What did you say to him?" "Nothing," Nyla said quietly. "I answered when he asked questions. That's all." "That's all?" Madame Choi's laugh was brittle. "You expect me to believe that one of the most powerful men in Seoul, a man who could have any woman he wants, is paying attention to you because of polite conversation?" She stood abruptly, circling the table like a shark. "No. Something else is at play here, and I will not allow you to jeopardize everything we've built." "I'm not trying to jeopardize anything," Nyla protested. "I didn't ask for any of this." "But you have it nonetheless." Madame Choi stopped behind Nyla's chair, her voice dropping to something cold and deadly. "Which is why we need to take action. Immediately." Mr. Choi cleared his throat, the first sound he'd made since the meeting began. "What kind of action?" "The permanent kind." Madame Choi moved back to her seat, and when she sat down, her face had transformed into a mask of false concern. "Nyla, darling, we've been thinking about your future. You've been with us for so long, and what do you have to show for it? No education, no prospects, no security. It keeps me up at night, truly." The darling and false sweetness were more terrifying than any slap. Nyla's fingers dug into her thighs beneath the table. "We've decided," Madame Choi continued, that it's time to help you establish yourself independently, as an adult, as a married woman. The room tilted. What? Marriage, Nyla. It's the natural next step for a young woman your age, and fortunately, I've already found someone suitable. She pulled a folded letter from her pocket, worn at the edges like she'd been carrying it for days. A gentleman in the outer district, a widower looking for a new wife. He's willing to take you with no dowry required. Really, it's quite generous. You can't be serious, Nyla whispered. You're going to marry me off to a stranger? I'm going to secure your future, Madame Choi corrected sharply. Something you should be grateful for considering your circumstances. The ceremony is arranged for tomorrow morning. Simple, civil, efficient. Tomorrow. The word came out strangled. The banquet is in 2 weeks. My invitation will be politely declined on your behalf. You'll be a married woman, settled in your new home, beginning your new life. Madame Choi's smile was pure venom. Far away from presidential banquets and inappropriate attention from men above your station. Understanding crashed over Nyla like a wave. This wasn't about her future or her well-being. This was about removing her from the board entirely, about making absolutely certain she couldn't attend the postponed banquet. They were so desperate, so terrified of losing their chance at the presidential connection, that they were willing to sell her to the first man who'd take her. What if I refuse? The question emerged before she could think better of it. The slap came so fast Nyla didn't see it coming. Her head snapped to the side, pain exploding across her cheek. Madame Choi stood over her, breathing hard, the mask of civility shattered. You don't get to refuse. You exist in this house because we allow it. You eat because we permit it. And now we're offering you a way out that doesn't involve throwing you onto the streets with nothing. Her voice rose to a shriek. You will accept this marriage with gratitude, or I will make your last hours in this house so unbearable you'll beg to marry anyone who'll take you. Nyla tasted copper where her teeth had cut her cheek. She looked at Mr. Choi, searching for any hint of humanity, any suggestion he might intervene. He stared at his hands on the table, jaw working silently, the coward he'd always been. Yura examined her nails, bored by the whole scene. Honestly, Mother is being generous. You should thank her. The ceremony is tomorrow at 9, Madame Choi said, smoothing her hair as if violence was merely a wrinkle to be pressed out. The man's name is Park Dong-min. You'll sign the papers, he'll collect you, and that will be the end of it. I suggest you pack your things tonight. You won't be welcome back. That night, Nyla lay on her cot and stared at the water-stained ceiling, weighing impossible choices. She could run, but where? She had no money, no phone, no one to call for help. Or she could accept this marriage. Let the Chois think they'd won. Because the truth was, anything had to be better than this house. Even marriage to a stranger. At least she'd be free of Madame Choi's cruelty, of Yura's casual violence, of existing as something less than human in a place that should have been home. At least she'd be choosing her own prison this time. Morning came too quickly. Madame Choi appeared at her door at 7 with a simple white dress on a hanger. Wear this, and do something with your hair. I won't have people saying we sent you to your wedding looking like a beggar. The dress fit perfectly, which somehow made everything worse. They'd planned this. This had never been about her future. It had always been about their fear. The ceremony took place in a sterile government office that smelled of old paper and broken dreams. Park Dong-min arrived precisely at 9, wearing a dark suit that looked expensive despite Madame Choi's claims of his poverty. He was perhaps in his early 40s, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor that seemed completely at odds with the situation. He bowed deeply when introduced to Nyla. Miss Carter, it's truly an honor to meet you. The courtesy stunned her. In all her years with the Chois, no one had ever called meeting her an honor. She managed a small bow in return, too shocked to speak. The official droned through the standard ceremony in a monotone that made it feel even more surreal. Nyla signed her name where indicated, her hand surprisingly steady. She watched as Park Dong-min signed the groom's section, though she couldn't quite make out the characters from her angle. The brushstrokes seemed elaborate, more flourish than she'd expect from a simple widower. Then it was done. The official stamped the certificate with red ink. Congratulations, you are now legally married. Madame Choi and Yura left within seconds, not even pretending interest in post-ceremony pleasantries. Do be happy, Madame Choi said with poisonous brightness, and don't worry about contacting us. We'll assume you're adjusting to your new life. Translation: don't come back. Don't call. Don't exist in our world anymore. When they were gone, Park Dong-min turned to Nyla with an expression that might have been sympathy. Are you ready, miss? Ready for what? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. To go home. Home. The word felt foreign on her tongue, but she nodded because what else was there? He led her outside to where a taxi waited. Not a luxury car. That much supported Madame Choi's story about his limited means. They loaded her single-worn suitcase into the trunk and climbed into the back seat. Park Dong-min gave the driver an address in a low voice, and they pulled away from the government building. Nyla watched Seoul pass by her window, each block taking her further from the only life she'd known. Her new husband sat beside her in silence, hands folded in his lap, not attempting conversation. The quiet felt strange after years of constant criticism and commands. 30 minutes became an hour, then 90 minutes. The city gradually transformed around them, buildings growing sparser, streets wider and lined with trees. Nyla frowned. The outer districts were supposed to be dense with cramped housing and struggling shops, but these neighborhoods looked increasingly affluent, with manicured lawns and expensive cars in driveways. Excuse me, she said quietly. Where exactly are we going? Park Dong-min glanced at her with those kind eyes that seemed to hold secrets. Not much further, miss. Perhaps 10 more minutes. Miss? Not wife. Not Nyla. The formality felt wrong, like he was addressing someone of higher rank rather than the woman whose name was now linked to his on a marriage certificate. The taxi turned onto a private road. Nyla's confusion deepened into alarm as they passed through ornate iron gates that opened automatically. The drive stretched ahead, lined with ancient trees and perfectly maintained hedges, and then the house appeared. Except calling it a house was like calling the ocean a puddle. The mansion rose before them in white, stone glory, 3 stories of classical architecture with wings extending in both directions. Manicured gardens surrounded it like a jeweled setting, and a fountain danced in the circular driveway where the taxi rolled to a stop. This wasn't poverty. This was wealth that made the Choi household look like a shabby imitation. Nyla's heart hammered against her ribs. This can't be right. You said you were a widower of limited means. Park Dong-min's expression remained carefully neutral. I never said any such thing, miss. That information came from others. He stepped out and opened her door, offering his hand with a bow. Please. The master is waiting inside. The master. The words hit her like ice water. What master? Something flickered across his face. Pity, perhaps. Or apology. Please, miss. Follow me. All will be explained. Terror spiked through her. Had she been sold? Trafficked under the guise of marriage? She thought about running, but the gates had already closed behind them, and she was miles from anywhere she recognized. The walls surrounding the estate looked 12 feet high at least. Park Dong-min retrieved her pathetic suitcase and gestured toward the mansion's entrance. His kindness felt more frightening than cruelty would have. This way, please. Her legs moved on autopilot, carrying her up marble steps and through doors that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. The interior stole her breath. floors of veined marble, chandeliers that threw rainbows across silk-covered walls, artwork that belonged in museums. Staff members moved through the halls with practiced silence, barely glancing at her as they passed. Park Dong-min led her up a grand staircase where each step felt like climbing toward judgment. The second-floor hallway stretched endlessly, lined with closed doors hiding unknown purposes. Finally, he stopped before a set of double doors made of dark wood carved with intricate patterns. He knocked once. A firm, respectful sound. "Come," said a voice from within. A voice Nyla recognized. A voice that made her heart stop and restart in a different rhythm entirely. "You may enter, miss," Park Dong-min said softly. "The master will explain everything." Nyla's hand trembled as she reached for the door handle. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her curiosity, or perhaps her need to understand, was stronger. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The study was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk of polished mahogany, windows overlooking gardens that seemed to stretch to the horizon. And behind the desk, rising from his chair with an expression she couldn't read, was Kang Seo-jun. He looked different here. More relaxed despite the expensive suit, more himself without the weight of public scrutiny. His dark eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Hello, Nyla," he said quietly. "I believe we need to talk." Nyla's mind couldn't process what her eyes were seeing. Seo-jun, here, in this mansion, standing before her like he belonged, because apparently he did. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "Please, sit," he said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. When she didn't move, frozen in shock, his expression softened. "You're safe here. I promise." "Safe?" The word finally unstuck from her throat. "I don't understand. What is this? Where am I? Why are you—" She looked down at her hands, at the simple gold band Park Dong-min had placed on her finger just hours ago. "What's happening?" Seo-jun moved around the desk, and she noticed he held papers in his hand. Official-looking documents with red stamps. He set them on the desk surface between them, turning them so she could read. Marriage certificate. She saw her name, her signature from this morning, and in the groom's section, where she'd watched. Park Dong-min's sign with those elaborate flourishes. She now read the characters clearly. Kang Seo-jun. The room tilted. She gripped the back of the chair to stay upright. "No, that's not possible. I married Park Dong-min. I watched him sign." "You watched my driver sign my name," Seo-jun corrected gently. "He has power of attorney for exactly these situations. The signature is legally mine." "Your driver." Nyla's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "The kind man who brought me here, who called you master." "Yes." "So I'm not married to him. I'm married to you." "Yes." The single word hung in the air between them. Nyla sank into the chair because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. Her mind raced through the morning's events, seeing them now through a different lens. The expensive suit, the elaborate signature, the way Park Dong-min had called her Miss with such careful respect. The honor he'd mentioned at meeting her. "How?" she whispered. "How did you even know they were planning this?" Seo-jun returned to his chair, his movements controlled and deliberate. "I have someone in the Choi household, someone who's been reporting to me since the first banquet." "A spy. An observer," he corrected. "Someone who was deeply disturbed by how you were being treated and reached out to my security team." His jaw tightened. "When they reported that Madame Choi was frantically arranging a marriage for you, to anyone she could find as quickly as possible, I knew I had to act." "Why?" The question burst from her. "Why would you go to such lengths? You barely know me." His eyes held hers, dark and intense, in a way that made her breath catch. "Because from the moment I saw you at that first banquet, I haven't been able to think of anything else." He stood, moving to the window as if he couldn't remain still. Because you've consumed my thoughts completely. Because I think of nothing but you. And it's driving me crazy. Nyla's heart hammered against her ribs. That's not... You can't... When I heard they were trying to marry you off to some wretched stranger just to keep you away from me, just to eliminate any possibility of us. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand the thought of you being with anyone else but me. You don't even know me, she whispered. He turned back to face her, and the raw emotion in his expression made her chest tight. Don't I? I know you've survived years in that house with your dignity intact. I know you have strength most people couldn't imagine. I know that when you look at me, you see a person, not a title or a trophy. He moved closer, stopping just in front of her chair. And I know that what I feel for you isn't rational or reasonable or anything I can explain. But it's real, Nyla. It's the most real thing I've felt in years. No. She shook her head, trying to make sense of this. You don't love me. You pity me. Pity? Something flashed in his eyes. Anger, but not at her. I've never felt pity for you, Nyla. Just rage. Pure, uncontrollable rage at what those people did to you. His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. Rage at them for treating you like property. Rage at you for letting them all these years. The accusation stung. Tears pricked her eyes. I had no other choice. Nowhere to go. His expression softened immediately. He crouched down in front of her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. I know. God, I know. And I'm sorry, that wasn't fair. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. But you have a choice now. What do you mean? He stood and returned to his desk, pulling out another document. This one was clearly prepared by lawyers, pages of legal language with official stamps. This is an annulment agreement, pre-signed by me. Nyla stared at the papers he placed on the desk. If you want to walk away from this marriage, you can, Seojun continued, his voice steady despite the tension in his shoulders. Today, tomorrow, whenever you decide, I'll provide you with everything you need. Money to start fresh, a place to live, resources for education, job training, whatever you want. You'll never have to see the Choys again. He paused. And you'll never have to see me again either if that's what you choose. You'll be completely free to build whatever life you want. Or? The word came out barely above a whisper. Or you can choose to stay with me, be my wife, my lover, the mother of my children someday, if you want that. His eyes searched hers. We can build a real relationship based on love and trust. Not obligation, not gratitude, not rescue, choice. Nyla's hands trembled. In her lap. You're asking me to choose between freedom and you. I'm asking you to choose what you want. Maybe for the first time in your life. He leaned against his desk, giving her space. I won't pressure you. I won't manipulate you. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it completely. That's my promise to you. The weight of the decision pressed down on her chest. Leave and be free. Alone but independent. Or stay with this man who claimed he couldn't stop thinking about her, who had orchestrated an entire rescue because the thought of her with someone else was unbearable. Can I think about it? She asked. Something flickered across his face, disappointment, quickly masked by understanding. Of course. Take all the time you need. He moved toward the door. Park Dong-min will show you to our room. Technically, our room is husband and wife, but I'll take one of the guest suites to give you space while you decide. No, Nyla said, quickly, surprising herself. If we're married, even if I'm still deciding, we should share the room. It's your house, your bedroom. I won't displace you. His eyes searched her face, looking for something. This is your house too now, Nyla. For as long as you want it to be. Park Dong-min appeared as if he'd been waiting just outside, his kind face carefully neutral. He led Nyla through corridors that felt endless, up another grand staircase to the third floor. The mansion seemed to sprawl forever, room after room of quiet luxury that made her former life feel like a distant nightmare. Finally, he stopped before a set of double doors even more ornate than those to the study. "The master bedroom," he said, opening them with a slight bow. "Your belongings have been unpacked in the closet, Mrs. Kang. If you need anything at all, press this button and someone will respond immediately." Mrs. Kang. The name felt surreal on her tongue. "Thank you," she managed. "For everything. For being kind this morning when I was so confused and frightened." His expression warmed with genuine affection. "It was truly my honor, ma'am. The master is fortunate to have you." He bowed again and left, closing the door with a soft click that seemed to seal her into this new reality. Nyla stood in the center of the room and felt her knees go weak. The bedroom was massive, larger than the entire ground floor of the Choi mansion. A bed that could sleep 4 people dominated the space, its frame carved from dark wood and dressed in silk sheets that caught the fading afternoon light. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens that stretched as far as she could see, all manicured perfection. Her pathetic little suitcase sat on an upholstered bench at the foot of the bed, looking embarrassed by its surroundings. She moved to the windows and pressed her hand against the cool glass. The grounds were beautiful, peaceful in a way that made her chest ache. Freedom, Seo-jun had offered. Complete freedom with resources to build any life she wanted. But there was something else in his offer too. Something in the way he'd looked at her when talking about building something real. Something that made her pulse quicken and her breath catch, and her heart whisper dangerous possibilities. A door to her right led to a bathroom that made her gasp out loud. All marble and gold fixtures, with a bathtub large enough to swim in and a shower that looked like it belonged in a luxury spa. Fluffy towels were stacked on heated racks, and the counter held expensive toiletries she'd only ever seen in magazines. Another door revealed a walk-in closet, and Nyla froze in the doorway, her breath catching. The closet was filled with clothes. Not just any clothes, designer pieces in her exact size, everything from casual wear to elegant evening gowns. Shoes lined one entire wall in every style and color imaginable, and, in a dedicated section that made her face heat, she found nightgowns and lingerie in silks and laces, beautiful pieces in rich jewel tones that would complement her skin perfectly. Elegant yet undeniably sexy, leaving little to the imagination. Someone had selected these with great care. She knew exactly who. Her fingers traced over a nightgown in deep emerald silk, and her stomach flipped at the thought of Seo-jun choosing this, imagining her in it. Did he picture removing it? Did he think about touching her the way his eyes suggested when he looked at her? She pulled her hand back, like the fabric had burned her. This was too much. All of it. The house, the clothes, the choice he'd given her. The raw honesty in his voice when he'd said he couldn't stop thinking about her, the rage on her behalf, the promise to respect whatever she decided. When had anyone ever respected her choices? When had anyone ever asked what she wanted? Nyla selected the most modest nightgown she could find, though even that was cream silk that would cling to her curves, and returned to the bathroom. She filled that enormous tub with hot water and sank into it, letting the heat unknot muscles that had been tense for as long as she could remember. She had decisions to make, a life to choose, a future that was suddenly, terrifyingly, entirely in her own hands. But for now, for this moment, she let herself simply exist in the warmth and quiet. Let herself imagine what it might be like to stay, to be wanted this fiercely, to build something real with someone who looked at her like she was the answer to questions he'd been asking his whole life. The water had gone lukewarm by the time she finally emerged. She dried off with towels so soft they felt like clouds and slipped into the silk nightgown. It felt decadent against her skin, nothing like the worn cotton she'd worn at the choi's. When she entered the bedroom, the sun had fully set. Soft lamps had been turned on. By whom? She didn't know. Creating pools of golden light that made the space feel intimate rather than overwhelming. She climbed onto that enormous bed and sank into a mattress that felt like sleeping on air. For the first time in years, Nyla felt safe. The door was closed. Locked, if she wanted it to be. No one would burst in demanding she scrub floors or serve breakfast. No one would slap her or call her ungrateful. No one would remind her of her place. She pulled the silk covers up to her chin and stared at the ceiling, her mind spinning with impossible choices and unexpected possibilities. Tomorrow she would have to decide. Tomorrow she would have to choose between freedom alone or partnership with a man who claimed she'd consumed his every thought. But tonight, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Nyla Carter, no, Nyla Kang, at least for now, allowed herself to simply rest. Morning came, with sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to close. Nyla woke, disoriented, reaching instinctively for the alarm that had never existed in her storage closet, only to find herself surrounded by silk and softness. For a moment she thought she'd dreamed everything, but then she saw the ring on her finger and reality crashed back. She was married to Kang Seo-jun, and she had a choice to make. A soft knock at the door made her pull the covers up to her chin. Yes? A young woman in a neat uniform entered with a breakfast tray. Good morning, Mrs. Kang. The master thought you might prefer to eat in your room this morning. She set the tray on the bedside table with a warm smile. But he'd like to see you in his study at 10, if you're available. Available. As if Nyla had a schedule to consult, obligations to juggle. Thank you. I'll be there. The breakfast was elaborate: fresh fruit, pastries, eggs prepared 3 different ways, juice and coffee. More food than she'd normally eat in 2 days at the Choi. She ate slowly, savoring flavors without someone hovering to criticize her manners or remind her how lucky she was to have scraps. At precisely 10, she made her way back to Seo-jun's study. He stood when she entered, and she noticed he looked tired, like maybe he hadn't slept well either. Good morning, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. I hope you rested well. I did. Thank you. She sat, folding her hands in her lap. You wanted to see me? He pulled out a sleek smartphone, still in its box. I thought you might need this. You should have a way to contact people, access information, have some independence. He slid it across the desk. It's already set up and activated. No restrictions, no monitoring. It's yours. Nyla stared at the phone like it might bite her. At the Choi, she'd been forbidden even basic technology. Now he was handing her unrestricted access to the world. I don't know how to use it, she admitted quietly. Then, I'll show you. He came around the desk and pulled up a chair beside hers, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something warm and expensive that made her pulse quicken. For the next hour, he walked her through the basics with surprising patience. How to make calls, send messages, browse the internet, download apps. This is ChatGPT, he explained, opening an app with a simple interface. You can ask it anything: questions, advice, information. It's like having a teacher available anytime. Nyla's fingers trembled as she held the device. Why are you giving me this? Because you deserve to know things, to learn, to have access to knowledge that was kept from you. His voice softened. Their eyes met, and the air between them felt charged. Nyla looked away first, her cheeks warming. The days that followed fell into an unexpected rhythm. Seo-jun left for work each morning. He still had a company to run, a public role to maintain, but he always ate breakfast with her first. They'd talk about small things, books, movies, her exploration of the mansion's extensive library. He never pressured her about her decision, never asked if she'd made up her mind. But the tension between them grew with each passing day. On the third day, Nyla was returning from the library when she heard the shower running in the master bathroom. She'd meant to grab a book from the bedroom and leave, but the bathroom door opened before she could retreat. Seo-jun stepped out wearing only a towel slung low on his hips, water still beading on his skin. His body was lean and muscular in ways his suits only hinted at, each line defined and beautiful, and Nyla's mouth went dry. He froze when he saw her, then had the audacity to smile. "Sorry, I thought you were downstairs." "I was. I needed—" Words failed her as her eyes traced the water droplets sliding down his chest. Heat pooled low in her belly, unfamiliar and overwhelming. "Book?" he supplied helpfully, his smile widening like he knew exactly what he was doing to her. "Yes. Book." She practically ran to the shelf, grabbed the first one she touched, and fled. Behind her, she thought she heard him chuckle. On the fourth day, she found him in his study working late. She'd brought him tea, a habit she'd developed, this small way of caring for him, and when she set it on his desk, his hand caught hers. "Thank you," he said simply, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "For this. For being here." The touch sent electricity up her arm. "I haven't decided yet," she reminded him, though her voice came out breathier than intended. "I know." He released her hand slowly, like he didn't want to. "Take all the time you need." But his eyes told a different story. They burned with want he was barely containing, with a hunger that matched the ache growing inside her. On the fifth day, they had dinner together on the terrace overlooking the gardens. The sun set in shades of orange and pink, and Seo-jun told her about his day, about the business deal that had fallen through, and the difficult conversation with his father about public expectations. "Do you ever get to just be yourself?" Nyla asked. "Not the president's son or the CEO or the political asset?" He was quiet for a long moment. "With you," he said finally. "When I'm with you, I feel like I can be just Seo-jun, just a man who wants something. Someone he can't have yet." "You have me?" she said softly. "We're married." "Are we?" His eyes held hers across the table. "Or are you just waiting for the right moment to leave?" She didn't have an answer for that. Not yet. That night she lay in their massive bed. She'd started thinking of it as theirs, though he still slept in the guest room, and thought about the moments between them, the way he looked at her like she was something precious, the careful distance he maintained even as his eyes devoured her, the respect he showed for her choice, even when it clearly cost him. She thought about the Chwais and the life she'd escaped, the cruelty, the degradation, the constant reminder that she was nothing. And then she thought about this place, this man, this unexpected future that had been offered to her like a gift. On the sixth day, Nyla woke with a decision half-formed in her mind. She spent the morning exploring the smartphone Seo-jun had given her, growing more comfortable with each app, each search. And then, feeling bold and terrified and exhilarated all at once, she opened ChatGPT. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she typed, "How to seduce your husband." The AI responded with a thoughtful list: create intimate moments, show genuine interest in his thoughts and feelings, physical touch, small gestures that build connection, confidence in your own desirability, eye contact, letting him know you want him. Nyla read through the suggestions twice, her face burning hotter with each point. Some seemed impossible. She'd never felt confident about anything, let alone her own desirability. But others felt natural. like things she'd already been doing without realizing it. She spent the afternoon preparing. She showered and actually took time with her appearance, choosing one of the beautiful dresses from the closet, a deep burgundy that hugged her curves before flowing to her knees. She left her hair down instead of pulled back, and even attempted makeup using the expensive products she'd found in the bathroom. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like a woman instead of a girl. Like someone who belonged in this mansion, in this life. Like someone worthy of being wanted. Seojun came home at his usual time, calling out a greeting as he entered. Nyla met him in the foyer, and the look on his face when he saw her made her heart stutter. Nyla. Her name came out rough, almost pained. You look... He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. Beautiful. You look beautiful. Thank you. She moved closer, remembering the advice about confidence even as her hands trembled. I thought we could have dinner together. Just us. Of course. His eyes tracked her movements like he was afraid she might disappear. Let me just change. No. She caught his arm, and the contact sent sparks through her. You're fine as you are. Dinner had been prepared by the staff, but Nyla had set the table herself on the terrace. Candles flickered in the growing dusk, and soft music played from speakers she'd figured out how to operate. It was romantic in a way she'd only seen in movies, and her stomach fluttered with nerves. They ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing. But beneath the conversation, tension hummed like a live wire. Every time their eyes met, heat flared. Every accidental touch felt deliberate. The air between them grew thicker, heavier, charged with possibility. You're different tonight, Seojun observed, setting down his wineglass. What changed? Nyla took a breath, gathering her courage. I've been thinking about what you said, about choosing what I want. His entire body went still. And? I'm still scared, she admitted, of making the wrong choice, of wanting something I don't deserve, of not being enough for this life, for you. Nyla, but I'm more scared of walking away from you. The words tumbled out in a rush. Of always wondering what if. Of spending my life safe and alone instead of taking a chance on something real. He stood from his chair, moving around the table toward her. What are you saying? She stood too, meeting him halfway. I'm saying I want to stay. I want to be your wife. I want... Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I want you. For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then he was cupping her face in his hands, tilting her head back so he could search her eyes. Are you sure? Because once I have you, Nyla, I won't let you go. I'm sure. The kiss, when it came, was nothing like she'd imagined. It was soft at first, almost reverent, like he was savoring something he'd thought impossible. His lips moved against hers with a gentleness that made her ache. Then her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and consuming. He tasted like wine and want, and she couldn't get enough. His arms came around her, one hand tangling in her hair, the other pressing against the small of her back. She melted into him, every nerve ending singing with sensation. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were dark with desire. Inside, he said, roughly. I need you inside, in our bed, where I've been imagining you for days. He swept her into his arms like she weighed nothing, carrying her through the mansion while she laughed breathlessly at the romantic absurdity of it. Their bedroom door closed behind them with a decisive click, and then he was setting her down beside the bed, his hands gentle despite the hunger in his eyes. Last chance to change your mind, he said, though his voice shook with the effort of offering her an out. Nyla reached for the zipper of her dress. I'm not changing my mind. His hands covered hers, stopping her. Let me. He turned her slowly, drawing the zipper down with aching slowness. The dress pooled at her feet. Seo-jun made a sound low in his throat. God, Nyla. You're so beautiful it hurts to look at you. She turned back to face him, emboldened by the reverence in his voice. Then don't just look. What followed was slow and sweet and overwhelming. He undressed her like unwrapping something precious, pressing kisses to each inch of skin he revealed. When she lay beneath him on their bed, trembling with nerves and need, he paused. I'll be gentle, he promised. Tell me if anything hurts or if you want me to stop. She nodded, unable to form words. And then he was moving above her. There was pain at first, sharp and brief. But he held still, whispering reassurances against her skin until it faded. Then there was only sensation, overwhelming, consuming, perfect. He claimed her like he'd been waiting his entire life for this moment. Slowly at first, watching her face, learning what made her gasp and arch into him. When sensations crashed over her in waves she hadn't known were possible, she cried out, clinging to him like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. He followed moments later, her name on his lips, his face buried in her neck. Afterward, they lay tangled together. Seo-jun pulled her close, pressing kisses to her temple, her cheek, her lips. You're mine now, he said softly. Completely mine. And you're mine, she replied, surprised by the possessiveness in her own voice. He smiled against her skin. I've been yours since the moment I saw you, beautiful. I was just waiting for you to catch up. They came together 2 more times that night, each time different. Playful, then passionate, then tender and slow as dawn broke over the gardens. By the time they finally fell asleep wrapped around each other, Nyla felt transformed, changed in ways that went deeper than the physical. She had chosen this, chosen him, chosen a future that was terrifying and unknown, and hers. The days after their first night together passed in a blur of intimacy and discovery. Nyla learned what it meant to be loved, truly loved, by someone who looked at her like she was his entire world. Seo-jun treated her like a princess, spoiling her with attention and affection. They spent hours talking, learning each other, simply existing together in their private sanctuary. But the selection banquet loomed closer with each passing day. The banquet is tomorrow, Nyla said one morning over breakfast. I want to go. Seo-jun looked up from his coffee, concern immediate in his eyes. You don't have to. You know that, right? I know I don't have to. She reached across the table for his hand. But I want to. I need to be there. I need to see their faces when they realize. He studied her for a long moment. You want to face them. I need to. Her voice was firm. Please, Seo-jun. Let me go. Let the night go as planned. I'll arrive separately, sit with the guests, and we'll act like we aren't married until you make the announcement. Nyla, please. She squeezed his hand. I need this. After much persuasion, he finally agreed, though the worry never left his eyes. The night of the banquet arrived. Nyla stood before their bedroom mirror in an ice-blue gown that hugged her curves perfectly before flowing to the floor. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, Kang family heirlooms. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, her makeup flawless. Seo-jun appeared behind her, devastating in his black tuxedo. You're breathtaking, he said softly, his hands settling on her waist. So are you. She turned in his arms. Ready? No, but I trust you. He kissed her, slow and deep. Remember the plan. We arrive separately. We don't acknowledge each other until the announcement. I know. And if they hurt you before then, I'll be fine. She cupped his face. Trust me. Nyla's car arrived first. She rode alone to the Grand Hyatt, her heart pounding with anticipation. This was it, the moment everything changed. The ballroom was already filling when she entered. Crystal chandeliers, white roses, everything gleaming with wealth and status. She walked in alone, and a few heads turned briefly before dismissing her. Just another guest. Nobody important. She found a seat among the crowd, not hidden, but not prominent. From where she sat, she could see Yura shooting daggers at her with her eyes. The Choi clearly resented her presence. The girl they'd married off to a poor widower, daring to show her face at such an elite event. But they didn't suspect anything beyond annoyance. To them, she was just the president's pity invite, the charity case he'd felt obligated to include. 30 minutes later, Seojun arrived with his father, and the room shifted. Every eye turned to him. Women preened, men positioned themselves strategically. He was the prize everyone had come to win. His gaze swept the room with practiced neutrality, passing over Nyla without pause. But in that brief moment their eyes met, heat flared between them. A secret shared. Then he looked away, greeting guests with polite distance. Nyla watched him work the room, her stomach fluttering with nerves and anticipation. Soon, very soon, everyone would know. The evening progressed with speeches and dinner. Multiple courses of expensive food that Nyla barely tasted. Her nerves made everything feel surreal, like she was watching herself from outside her body. She needed a moment. The anticipation was building to an unbearable pitch. Nyla excused herself quietly and headed toward the restroom. The space was empty when she entered, all marble and gold. She moved to the sink, running cool water over her wrists, taking deep breaths. The door opened behind her. Yura's reflection appeared in the mirror. She must have followed. Well, well, Yura said, her voice dripping with contempt. Look who's here. Tell me, Nyla, how does it feel? Being married to that pathetic old man we found for you? Living in whatever hovel he calls home? Nyla didn't respond. She dried her hands slowly, keeping her expression carefully neutral. Submissive, like she'd always been in the Choi house. Nothing to say? Yura stepped closer, her expensive perfume cloying. That's right. Stay quiet like the good little servant you are. You know your place, don't you? She laughed, cruel and sharp. I have to admit, I'm surprised you had the nerve to show your face here. What? Did the president feel sorry for you? Invite you out of pity after hearing we'd married you off? Nyla kept her eyes downcast, her hands clasped in front of her. Silent, submissive, everything they expected. You're pathetic, Yura continued, emboldened by Nyla's lack of response. Coming here in your borrowed dress, pretending you belong with your betters? But we all know the truth, don't we? She moved even closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You're nobody. The unwanted orphan we graciously took in. And now you're some poor man's wife, probably scrubbing floors in exchange for a roof over your head. Some things never change. Nyla's hands trembled slightly, but she kept them folded, kept her posture submissive. When Seojun chooses me tonight, and he will choose me, I want you to watch. I want you to see the difference between us, between someone who was born for this life and someone who will always be beneath it. Yura's smile was vicious. You should leave before the announcement. Crawl back to whatever poor excuse for a home you have now. Save yourself the humiliation of watching me become Mrs. Kang while you're married to a pauper. Still, Nyla said nothing. She didn't react. She acted exactly as she'd always acted in the Choi house. Silent, defeated, broken. Good girl, Yura said with satisfaction. At least you remember how to behave. Now run along back to your seat. Try not to embarrass yourself further. She turned on her designer heel and left, leaving Nyla alone in the restroom. The moment the door closed, Nyla raised her head and met her own eyes in the mirror. A small smile played at her lips. Soon, Yura. Very soon, you'll understand how wrong you are. She took one more deep breath, smoothed her dress, and returned to the ballroom. The announcement would come any minute now, and then the Choys would learn exactly who she had become. Back in the ballroom, the energy had shifted. President Kang stood at the front of the room, commanding attention with his mere presence. Beside him, Seojun looked composed, handsome, powerful. "Ladies and gentlemen," President Kang's voice carried effortlessly across the space. "Thank you all for joining us this evening for what was meant to be a selection ceremony." The crowd leaned forward, anticipation thick in the air. However, President Kang continued with a slight smile. "It seems my son has already made his choice." Whispers erupted. Women exchanged confused glances. Mothers grabbed their daughters' hands. Seojun stepped forward, and the room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone born to command. "You've all been amazing and equally beautiful." Nyla could see Yura from where she sat. Her former tormentor was practically vibrating with anticipation, a triumphant smile already forming on her lips. "But there's only one who caught my eye," Seojun continued. "Someone extraordinary. Someone who saw past the title and position to the man underneath. Someone with strength and grace and a heart that humbles me every day." Yura stood, adjusting her champagne gown, preparing to walk forward. Her mother's face was alight with victory. "Please, join me in celebrating," Seojun said, his eyes finding Nyla's across the crowd. "My beautiful wife, Nyla Kang." The room exploded with gasps and shocked whispers. Every head turned, searching for this mysterious wife. Nyla stood on trembling legs and began making her way toward the front. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, staring at her in disbelief. She could hear the whispers. "Who is she?" But Nyla kept her eyes on Seojun, on the pride and love shining in his face as he watched her approach. Madame Choi's face had gone white, then red, cycling through emotions too quickly to name. Yura stood frozen, her hand still on her gown where she'd been adjusting it, her mouth hanging open in complete shock. How? Nyla could see the question screaming from their eyes. How had the poor widower they'd sold her to turned out to be Kang Seojun? Nyla reached the front and took Seojun's offered hand. He pulled her close, his arms sliding possessively around her waist. "Everyone," he said, his voice warm with affection. "Meet my wife, Nyla Kang. We were married 2 weeks ago." He looked down at her with such tenderness it made her breath catch. "And I've never been happier." The crowd erupted in polite applause, though the shock was palpable. Nyla could feel hundreds of eyes on her, assessing, judging, wondering. But she only cared about one pair of eyes, and Seojun was looking at her like she was the only person in the room. The applause continued, though Nyla could feel the weight of judgment behind it. Society would have questions. They always did. But standing here in Seojun's arms, she found she didn't care. President Kang stepped forward, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "My new daughter-in-law," he said with genuine warmth that surprised Nyla. "Welcome to the family officially, Mrs. Kang." The formality of it, the public acknowledgement, made it real in a way the private ceremony hadn't. Nyla bowed respectfully. "Thank you, sir. It's an honor." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations from people who'd ignored her existence hours before. Society's elite lined up to meet the new Mrs. Kang, their smiles plastic, their curiosity barely masked. Nyla played her part with grace, Seojun's hand never leaving the small of her back. Through it all, she was aware of the Chois watching from across the room. Madame Choi's face had settled into rigid fury. Yura looked like she might shatter. Mr. Choi just appeared confused, his usual state. As the crowd began to thin, guests making their exits, Seojun was pulled aside by his father to speak with some businessmen. "I'll just be a moment," he murmured to Nyla, pressing a kiss to her temple. Wait for me? Always, she replied. She found a seat near the edge of the ballroom, smoothing her gown and allowing herself a moment to breathe. The night had been perfect. Better than she'd imagined. The look on Yura's face alone had been worth, "Well, you scheming slut." The voice came from behind her, dripping with venom. Madame Choi appeared in her peripheral vision, Yura close behind. Both their faces were twisted with rage, barely contained by social propriety. "You managed to trick the president's son into marriage with you," Madame Choi hissed, keeping her voice low enough that nearby guests wouldn't hear. "I don't know how you pulled it off, but—" "What a joke," Yura cut in, her voice shaking with fury. "You probably seduced him. Threw yourself at him like the desperate little—" "Careful," Nyla said quietly, rising to her feet. She was done sitting while they stood over her. Done looking up at them. "You might want to choose your next words very carefully." "How dare you speak to us like that?" Madame Choi stepped closer, her hand rising. "After everything we did for you, you ungrateful." The slap came fast, but not from Madame Choi. Nyla's hand connected with Yura's cheek with a sharp crack that echoed in the now quiet corner of the ballroom. Yura stumbled back, her hand flying to her face, eyes wide with shock. "I've been quiet," Nyla said, her voice steady and cold. "But I'm not a fool. If you ever speak down on me or my marriage again, I'll teach you a lesson you won't forget in a hurry." You hit her." Madame Choi's voice rose and several heads turned. "How dare you raise your hand to my daughter?" "She deserved it." Nyla didn't back down, didn't cower. "And so do you for every slap, every insult, every moment you made me feel less than human." Madame Choi's face went purple with rage, her hand shot up, aiming for Nyla's face with years of practice behind it. The slap never landed. Seo Jun's hand caught Madame Choi's wrist mid-swing, his grip iron tight. He'd appeared like a shadow, his expression colder than Nyla had ever seen it. Dangerous. "If you so much as lay a finger on my wife," he said, his voice low and deadly, "you'll spend the rest of your life in jail." "Mr. Kang, Madame Choi tried to pull her wrist free, but he held firm. "I wasn't finished." His eyes were black ice. "Don't think I don't have evidence of your abuse. Years of it. Security footage from your household, testimony from staff members, medical records from the times Nyla's injuries should have been reported, but weren't." He released her wrist with a slight push that made her stumble. "You'll be locked up more than you'll be outside. Do I make myself clear?" Yes, sir," Madame Choi stammered, all her earlier bravado evaporating. Seo Jun's gaze shifted to Yura, who was still clutching her reddening cheek. "That goes for you, too. Stay away from my wife. Don't speak to her. Don't speak about her. If I hear you've so much as mentioned her name, I'll destroy you socially before I destroy you legally. Understood?" Yes, sir," Yura whispered, tears of humiliation streaming down her face. "Good. Now get out of my sight." The Choi women fled, Madame Choi pulling Yura toward the exit. Mr. Choi, who'd been hovering uselessly in the background, gave Nyla one long look. Regret, maybe, or shame, before following his family out. The moment they were gone, Seo Jun turned to Nyla, his harsh expression melting into concern. "Did they hurt you?" His hands framed her face, tilting it gently as he checked for injuries. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." She caught his hands in hers. "Better than fine. Did you see Yura's face when I slapped her?" A smile tugged at his lips. "I did. My fierce wife." He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. "I'm so proud of you. The way you stood up to them, the way you held your ground. God, Nyla." "Can we go home now?" she asked softly. "I want to be alone with you." "Yes." He kissed her, soft and quick. "Let's go home." The car ride back to the mansion was charged with tension of a different kind. Nyla could feel Seojun's eyes on her, hot and intense. Every time she glanced his way, the heat in his gaze made her stomach flip. "What?" she asked finally, her voice coming out breathier than intended. "You," he said simply, "watching you stand up for yourself tonight. Seeing you claim your power." His jaw clenched. "You have no idea what it did to me." "Tell me," she whispered. His hand found her thigh, sliding slowly upward. "When we get home, I'll show you." They barely made it through the front door. The moment it closed behind them, Seojun pinned Nyla against the wall in the foyer, his mouth claiming hers in a kiss that was all heat and hunger and desperation. "I've been wanting to do this all night," he growled against her lips. "Watching you in this dress, knowing you were mine but having to keep my hands to myself." "Then don't keep them. To yourself now," Nyla gasped as his mouth moved to her neck. He groaned, his hands sliding down to grip her sides. In one smooth motion, he lifted her, and she wrapped her legs around his waist. "Bedroom?" "Too far," she breathed, pulling at his bow tie. He carried her to the grand staircase, setting her down on the steps. "You're so beautiful," he murmured, sliding the straps of her gown down her shoulders. "So strong, so perfect, and all mine." "All yours," she agreed, fumbling with the buttons of his shirt. They came together right there on the stairs. He worshipped her, whispering praise against her skin. How proud he was, how much he loved her, how watching her defend herself had affected him beyond measure. Afterward, they lay tangled together on the stairs. "We should probably move to an actual bed," Nyla said with a breathless laugh. "Probably," Seojun agreed, but neither of them moved. He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with such tenderness it made her ache. "I love you, Nyla Kang. I don't think I've said it enough today." "I love you too." She cupped his face. "Thank you. For tonight. For everything. For giving me the choice to face them." "You didn't need me for that. You've always had that strength." He kissed her softly. "I just helped you see it." 3 days later, Seojun came home from work with an expression that made Nyla set down her book immediately. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." He sat beside her on the couch, taking her hands. "In fact, something's very right. My investigators have been looking into your past, into your parents." Nyla's breath caught. "My parents? Why?" "Because something didn't add up. The choice claimed they took you in as a charity case, that your parents left you with nothing. But I did some digging." His jaw tightened. "Nyla, your parents weren't poor. They were successful. They owned properties, had investments, built a considerable estate." "What?" Nyla's mind reeled. "But I was so young when they died. I knew we had a nice house, that we were comfortable, but I didn't understand. Where did it all go?" "The Choys took it." His voice was hard with anger. "Your parents left everything in trust for you. Properties, assets, investments. All of it was supposed to be turned over to you when you came of age. Instead, the Choi have been using it, profiting from it, keeping everything that should have been yours." Nyla felt like the ground had shifted beneath her. "They... what? All this time, You would have been financially independent years ago. You never would have needed them, never would have been dependent on their cruelty." He squeezed her hands. "They knew, Nyla. They kept you ignorant and powerless deliberately." Tears burned her eyes, but they were tears of rage, not sadness. "How much are we talking about?" "Substantial. Multiple properties in Seoul and abroad. Investment portfolios. Your childhood home. They've been renting it out for years and pocketing the income." His expression darkened. "Everything that should have been yours, they stole." Nyla stood abruptly, pacing the room as her mind tried to process this. I don't understand. How is that even legal? How did they get away with it? Your parents named them as temporary guardians in their will, with the stipulation that all assets be held in trust until you turn 21. The Choys were supposed to manage the estate for your benefit, provide for your education and upbringing from those funds, then transfer everything to you. He stood too, moving to her side. Instead, they took everything, told you that you had nothing, and made you believe you owed them for basic survival. I turned 21 2 years ago, Nyla whispered, the full horror of it sinking in. They should have told me then, given me everything then. They had no intention of ever telling you. They would have kept it forever if I hadn't started investigating. Nyla's hands shook with fury. What do we do now? I've already compiled all the evidence. Tomorrow my lawyers will file charges: fraud, embezzlement, theft from a minor, breach of fiduciary duty. The list is extensive. He cupped her face gently. But I wanted to ask you first. This is your decision, Nyla. Do you want to pursue this? It will be public. It will be ugly. They'll try to fight back. Nyla thought of all the years scrubbing floors that should have been hers, wearing rags while they profited from her inheritance, being called ungrateful while they stole her birthright. Yes, she said firmly, I want them to pay for everything they've done. Seojun smiled, fierce and proud. Then let's destroy them. The legal machinery moved faster than Nyla expected. Within a week, Seojun's lawyers had filed a comprehensive lawsuit against the Choi family. The charges were damning: fraud, embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty, theft from a minor, and criminal conversion of assets. The evidence was overwhelming: financial records, property deeds, bank statements spanning over 15 years. Nyla was reviewing documents in Seojun's study when her phone rang, an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Nyla. Madame Choi's voice was strained, desperate in a way Nyla had never heard before. We need to talk. Please, just give me 5 minutes. Nyla's first instinct was to hang up, but curiosity, and perhaps the desire to hear them beg, made her stay on the line. Talk. This lawsuit, these accusations, they're misunderstandings. Yes, we managed your parents' estate, but we used that money to raise you, to feed you, to give you a home. You used a fraction of it to keep me barely alive while you profited from the rest. Nyla cut in coldly. You stole my inheritance and made me your slave. That's not a misunderstanding. That's theft. Please. The word came out broken. We can work this out. We'll return everything. Make it right. Just drop the charges. Think of Yura. This will destroy her future, her reputation. Did you think of my future when you locked me in a storage closet? Nyla's voice was ice. Did you think of my reputation when you slapped me in front of guests? When you called me ungrateful trash? Silence. Then, we gave you everything. A roof over your head, food. You gave me what was already mine. Nyla's composure cracked. My parents left me a fortune and you stole it. You made me scrub floors in my own house, eat scraps from my own money, and convinced me I should be grateful for the privilege of being abused. Nyla, please. Madame Choi's voice broke into sobs, real or manufactured. I'm begging you. We'll give it all back. Every penny. Just make this go away. No. The word was final. You taught me that begging doesn't work, that people like me don't deserve mercy. So I'm applying your own lessons, Madame Choi. You get what you deserve, nothing more. She hung up. Seojun looked up from his laptop, pride shining in his eyes. That sounded satisfying. It was. Nyla's hands were shaking, but from exhilaration, not fear. She's scared. She should be. The prosecutors are moving forward with criminal charges. This isn't just civil court anymore. They're looking at jail time. He stood and moved to her side. Are you ready for what comes next? What comes next? They'll try harder. They'll show up here probably. Beg in person. Make scenes. Try to manipulate you with guilt or threats. His hand found hers. I need you to be prepared for that. Nyla squeezed his hand. I'm ready. Let them come. They came 2 days later. Nyla was in the garden when the security team called. Mrs. Kang, the Choi family is at the gate demanding entry. Should we call the police? She could have said yes. Should have, probably. But something in her wanted to face them one final time, wanted them to see her standing tall in her own home, powerful and untouchable. Let them into the driveway, not the house. I'll meet them outside. Seo-jun appeared at her side within minutes, clearly having been alerted by security. You don't have to do this. I know. But I want to. They walked to the front of the mansion together. The Choi family's car, noticeably less luxurious than it had been, Nyla noted with satisfaction, sat in the circular drive. All three of them emerged, Madame Choi looking haggard, her makeup unable to hide the stress lines, Mr. Choi gray and defeated, and Yura, her designer clothes unable to mask the desperation in her eyes. Nyla. Madame Choi started forward, but security stepped between them. Please, just listen to us. You have 5 minutes, Nyla said calmly. Then you're escorted off the property. This is insane, Yura burst out, her voice shrill. You're going to destroy us over money? Over some old grudge? I'm going to get justice for what you stole from me, Nyla corrected. There's a difference. We didn't steal anything. Madame Choi's voice rose. We raised you. Do you know how much it costs to feed and clothe a child for 15 years? We deserve compensation for that. You used my money to raise me, Nyla said, her voice deadly calm. Money my parents left specifically for that purpose. Except you didn't just use what was necessary. You lived like kings while I slept in a closet. You sent Yura to private schools while I wasn't allowed to attend any school. You threw lavish parties with my inheritance while I ate leftovers in the kitchen. That's not... We didn't... Madame Choi's face crumbled. Please, Nyla, I'm begging you. We'll lose everything. The house, our savings, everything. And the criminal charges. We could go to prison. Yes, Nyla said simply. You could. Mr. Choi finally spoke, his voice hollow. I'm sorry. He looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I should have stopped it. Should have protected you. But I was weak. And I let her. He glanced at his wife. I let this happen. And you're right to hate us. The apology, unexpected and seemingly genuine, didn't move her. It was too little. Decades too late. Your apology doesn't change anything, Nyla said. It doesn't give me back my childhood. It doesn't erase the scars. And it definitely doesn't make me drop the charges. You vindictive snake! Yura spat, her composure finally shattering completely. This is about Seo-jun, isn't it? You're punishing us because you won and I lost. You can't just be happy. You have to destroy us, too. This has nothing to do with Seo-jun, Nyla said coldly. This is about you stealing 15 years of my life and my entire inheritance. But since you brought it up, how does it feel, Yura? Losing everything? Being the one people look down on? You! Enough, Seo-jun's voice cut through like a blade. You have 3 minutes left, and I suggest you use them to say whatever you came to say. Because after that, you're not welcome on this property ever again. Madame Choi dropped to her knees, and for a moment Nyla thought it was a trick. But the woman's sobs seemed genuine, her pride finally shattered. Please, I'm begging you, don't do this. We'll give everything back. We'll apologize publicly. Whatever you want. Just don't send us to prison, please. It was the please that did it. How many times had Nyla said that word? How many times had she begged for mercy, for kindness, for just a moment of humanity? And how many times had Madame Choi ignored her? No, Nyla said quietly. You taught me that begging means nothing. That power is all that matters. Well, now I have the power, and you're the one begging. And my answer is the same one you gave me every single time I asked for mercy. No. Nyla, your 5 minutes are up. Security, please escort them off the property. If they return, call the police and have them arrested for trespassing. Security moved forward. Madame Choi had to be helped to her feet, still sobbing. Mr. Choi went quietly, his shoulders slumped in defeat. But Yura turned back one last time, her face twisted with hatred. I hope you're happy, she hissed. I hope destroying us was worth it. It was, Nyla said simply. Goodbye, Yura. She watched them drive away, Seojun's arm around her waist, and she felt nothing but peace. The trial moved quickly. With the mountain of evidence Seojun's team had compiled, the Choi's lawyers advised them to take a plea deal. Mr. Choi received 5 years for his role in the fraud, reduced because of his cooperation and genuine remorse. Madame Choi, as the primary architect of the scheme, received 12 years. Their assets were seized to pay restitution, though it barely covered what they'd stolen. The Choi mansion, the house Nyla had cleaned for years, was sold at auction. Nyla attended, watching strangers bid on the property. She could have bought it herself, reclaimed it, but she didn't want it. That house held nothing but painful memories. She let it go to a young family with 3 children who promised to fill it with laughter. Yura's punishment was less formal but perhaps more devastating. Seoul's elite society, taking their cues from the Kang family, turned their backs on her completely. Invitations dried up. Former friends stopped returning calls. The modeling contracts she'd been so proud of were quietly terminated. Nyla heard through the social grapevine that Yura had moved to Japan, trying to rebuild her life far from the scandal. She felt no satisfaction in that, just a distant acknowledgement that justice had been served. 6 months after the trial concluded, Nyla stood in front of a building she'd only seen in faded photographs, her childhood home. The property that had been rented out for years was finally vacant, the tenant's lease having ended. Seojun squeezed her hand as they walked up the steps together. Are you sure you want to do this? I need to, she said softly. The key turned smoothly in the lock. The interior had been updated by various tenants over the years, but the bones of the house remained, and with them, fragments of memory. The living room where she'd played as a child, the kitchen where her mother had made breakfast, the staircase she'd tumbled down once, her father catching her before she hit the bottom. I remember this place, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Not clearly, but feelings, safety, love, home. What do you want to do with it? Seojun asked gently. Nyla walked through the rooms, touching walls, remembering. Then she knew. I want to turn it into a home for children in situations like mine, kids stuck with abusive guardians, kids aging out of the foster system, kids who need a safe place. She turned to look at him. A real home, where they're loved and protected and given opportunities. Everything I should have had. Seojun pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. That's perfect. Your parents would be so proud of you. I hope so, she whispered. 3 months later, the Carter house opened its doors to its first residents. Nyla spent 1 day a week there, meeting with the children, listening to their stories, making sure they knew they were valued, that they mattered, that their past didn't define their future. Standing in the garden of the home that had once been hers, watching children play and laugh in spaces that had been silent for too long, Nyla finally felt complete. She'd reclaimed more than her inheritance. She'd reclaimed her power, her voice, her life. And she was using it to make sure no child would suffer the way she had. Ready to go home? Seojun appeared at her side, always knowing when she needed him. Yes, she said, taking his hand. Let's go home. As they drove away from the Carter house toward their mansion, toward their life together, Nyla looked back one last time. The children were still playing, safe and loved and free. Just as she was now. Free to love, free to choose, free to live. And that freedom was worth everything. If you enjoyed Nyla's complete journey from invisible servant to empowered woman who turned her pain into purpose, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories of justice and redemption. Drop a comment below telling us what you thought of the Choi's downfall. Was the punishment enough? What would you have done in Nyla's position? Let us know your thoughts, and we'll see you in the next story.
Hey you, I need a little privacy with my husband. Can you look away?